Hey guys, today's video is going to be the ultimate guide to serve stances, and there's going to be two main stances on the tennis serve. The platform stance, where the feet are in the same position throughout the beginning portion of your serve. Naturally, as you start going up into the contact at the high level, when the tip of the racket is pointing towards the ground, that's when the feet get airborne. This is true for both the platform stance and the pinpoint stance. But the platform stance will have the feet in the same position until we get airborne. There is a weight shift, however. This is going to depend on your rhythm. But the good thing about a platform stance serve is that you don't have to worry about pulling the back foot up, which happens to be the pinpoint stance, where the back foot doesn't stay in the same position. It pulls up towards the front foot, and this should occur prior to the trophy phase. So as the racket is going up towards the trophy, the back foot should pull up to the front foot. Now, within each stance, there's going to be several variations. So let me tell you what those variations are. So on the platform stance, we're going to have a regular platform stance where the tip of the back foot is aligned with the heel of the front foot. That is the regular platform stance. There's also the lateral platform stance, where there's a gap between the tip of the back foot and the heel of the front foot. There's also the extreme lateral platform stance, where the back foot is aligned with the front foot in regards to the baseline. And this is an extreme position because our body is completely turned towards the back fence when we set up in this way. There's also the reverse platform stance, where the back foot is on the hitting side of the body. And this is a stance that you don't see so much nowadays, but back in the 80s and the 90s, there were some players who utilized this stance, and some of them would actually land on their right foot if they happen to be right-handed. And finally, there's also the narrow platform stance, where the feet are very close together. And this is a stance that's not very common, but there have been some great servers who have utilized this stance. When it comes to the pinpoint stance, we're going to have two variations. And the first one is the regular pinpoint stance, where the back foot simply pulls up right behind the front foot. Another pinpoint stance is one where the back foot goes towards the outside of the body. This is a stance that's very common on the WTA Tour. Now, players that manage to get a coil, and this you do see more frequently on the ATP Tour. And I named this serve the corkscrew serve because the bottom portion of your body is turned towards the outside, while the top portion of your body is turned towards the inside, and the body is twisted like a corkscrew. And a variation to the corkscrew pinpoint stance is one where players pull the back foot up towards the outside of the body, but they don't coil a lot. They have a regular coil, and the body is in no way set up like a corkscrew, but yet the back foot happens to be on the outside. This is a stance that you very frequently see on the WTA Tour. Now, when it comes to stances, this is something that I do encourage you to experiment with. Even on the ATP and the WTA Tour, you will see players who will switch their stances mid-career. For example, go from a pinpoint stance to a platform stance, or they will switch the variations within one stance. So what's going to happen as you experiment with these different stances, you're going to find one that's going to work best for you. But having said that, I'm going to give you some general recommendations that you should follow at the recreational level. So the stances that you should stay away from are the following ones. You shouldn't set your serve up with the reverse platform stance. Why? Because in this stance it's going to be very difficult to coil. It is possible, but the coiling would have to happen much later in the service motion, and this might provide some challenges to a lot of players. It's also challenging to land on your left foot, and this stance might cause you to over-rotate. So I do not recommend the reverse platform stance. On the other hand, while an extreme lateral platform stance will give you an automatic coil, it's often going to be a coil that you're not going to be able to get out of because it's too extreme, where your hips and your chest is pointed towards the back fence, and a lot of players don't have fast enough body actions to be able to come out of a coil that's this large. Also, while the narrow platform stance might look like a simple solution to your serve problems, this is going to provide a lot of challenges because it's going to be very difficult to have a rhythm within this stance. Because what you have to realize is that when we go through our service motion, we're going to be shifting the weight from the front foot to the back foot and then back to the front foot. This is what I refer to as the rocking motion. So when your feet are very close together, it's going to be more difficult to get a good rhythm on your serve. Another stance that's going to be difficult to pull off is the corkscrew pinpoint stance, where the back foot goes towards the outside and the upper body is coiled in an extreme way. A lot of recreational players will not have enough flexibility to come out of a loading position that's this extreme. So this leaves us with three stances that I recommend for the recreational level. We have the lateral platform stance, we have the regular platform stance, and we have the regular pinpoint stance, with the variation of having the ability to bring the foot towards the outside with a regular coil. So I highly encourage you that you experiment with the stances that I just mentioned, and you're quickly going to find one that works best for you. But a few things to keep in mind. If you are a beginner, you don't want to develop your serve with the pinpoint stance right away, because that's going to add a lot of challenges in your development. There's many other things that you have to worry about. Sinking the toss arm with the hitting arm, getting a proper racket drop, starting to utilize your power sources, and so on. So timing the pulling up of the back foot might provide a lot of challenges to somebody that's a beginner level tennis player. So for that reason, if you are a beginner, I advise you to start with the platform stance. And the one that's going to be the easiest to pull off is the regular platform stance, where the tip of the back foot is aligned with the heel of the front foot. Now, one important thing to consider for everyone, this goes from the beginner level to the professional level, is that there's going to be variations in the stances when we're serving towards the ad side and the deuce side. And this goes for some of the greatest servers of all time. Now, let's just take Federer as an example. Federer will have a lateral platform stance when he's serving to the ad side. In other words, there's going to be a gap between the tip of his back foot and the heel of the front foot. But then when he serves from the deuce side, he's going to have a regular platform stance where the tip of the back foot is aligned with the heel of the front foot. So for the lower recreational levels, I recommend that you don't worry about changing your stances and you have the same stance for both sides. One thing you should avoid is having the feet right next to each other. And the reason why I say that is because it's going to make the coil more difficult. See, what happens is when you have a regular platform stance and the tip of the back foot is aligned with the heel of the front foot, naturally as you go into your take back, you will naturally get a coil because your body is slightly turned backwards. One thing to keep in mind is that the front foot must be slightly pointed forward, ideally towards the right net post, and also the back foot must be slightly turned backwards so that we can more naturally achieve that coiling position without our hips being locked. Because let's just say, for example, that my back foot is parallel to the baseline. If I try to coil, this is going to put a lot of pressure on my right hip. At the same time, if my front foot is turned backwards and now I try to rotate, this is going to put a lot of pressure on my front hip. So you have to make sure that regardless if you have a pinpoint stance or a platform stance, when you start off your serve, you're going to have your front foot positioned slightly forward and your back foot position slightly backward so that you can get a more natural coil right off the bat. Now, if you're someone that's going to find the comfort in having a lateral pinpoint stance like many ATP players do, the advantage you're going to get is that the coil is going to be larger naturally. So when I put my feet further apart and there's a gap between the tip of my back foot and the heel of my front foot, as I go into my takeback, you can see that I naturally get a larger coil, and that's generally an advantage as long as players are able to come out of a coil. And that's the big caveat there, and this is where you have to make sure that the stance that you're choosing fits your body types, fits your athleticism, and fits your overall rhythm of the serve. People often ask me, Nick, what's the better stance, the pinpoint stance or the platform stance? And there's no correct answer to this question because each stance is going to be the optimal stance for each individual player. I'm going to use myself as an example. I've always used the platform stance. Have I experimented with the pinpoint? Of course I have, and it never felt comfortable. I could never get the timing down. I could never load my body properly with that back foot. So when it comes to experimentations, you always have to stick with what feels best. But having said that, there is some evidence to suggest that the pinpoint stance provides more effortless forward momentum. When you take a look at the WTA Tour, you will see that the pinpoint stance is used almost ubiquitously. In other words, there's a very few players that utilize the platform stance, and this is not a coincidence. When we pull the back foot up to the front foot, we get that forward momentum to happen more intuitively as opposed to manufacturing the forward momentum from a stationary position. Now remember that when you look at female serves, they often utilize the natural ways of creating power because they don't possess the raw athleticism that some of the male servers do. Again, I'm going to stress that none of these stances are right or wrong. Some of the greatest servers in the history of tennis have utilized all of these stances that I mentioned. So it's going to be up to you to experiment and find which stance is going to suit your unique service motion the best.